Hi, folks who have joined. We are going to wait just a minute or two to allow any other people who are trying to connect to get in. Hi, Atta. We are waiting just a minute or so. Hi, Atta. Just a minute or so in case there's somebody else trying to connect. Hi. And we are recording this so that anybody who is not able to make it tonight, we're going to put this up on our website after this so that other folks can see the recording, see and hear the recording if they weren't able to make it. All right, maybe I'll give it one more minute. Okay, well, I think I'll get started. Hi, folks. I'm Rachel Hyatt. I think I know everybody who's here. Oh, one more. Tramisha's here. Let's let her in. Hi, we are getting started right now. Thank you for taking the time to come this evening for this update. I'm Rachel Hyatt with SFCTA, or Treasure Island Mobility Management Agency, and two of my colleagues are here, Paige and Brittany. They are here for technical support, so you can chat them if you have any technical difficulties during this session. And also here are Liz Hirschhorn from TIDA, and we also had Monica Barnett here. She's coming back in. Let's just wait for her to get back in. Monica Barnett is here from the Commissioner Haney's office as well. So I'm going to share my screen. And for folks who were at any of our previous outreach meetings earlier in the summer, thank you for your participation in those. We got a lot of information, and we've revised the potential business and worker benefit programs based on your feedback, and want to share what we've done to revise based on what we've heard and share some next steps. So I'll just briefly go through what we heard and then how we've revised the proposals. Then we'll have question and answer, and do chat Paige Miller if you are having any difficulties. And then I'll share some next steps. I think everyone here knows that in 2019, our board adopted a policy to make current Treasure Island residents exempt from the toll. So we are focusing now on businesses and workers and the affordability supports we can provide for current businesses and workers. And again, thanks for those of you who participated in our events that we held. We want to, or what we have been wanting to do is hear your concerns and suggestions about the kind of prototype initial ideas that we presented, and then revise them based on what we've heard. So the beneficiaries for this proposed policy are the same parties, actually expanded somewhat from the parties we presented to the board back in fall of 2020. So they would include all nonprofits on the islands. So that includes all One Treasure Island members, but also other nonprofits on Treasure Island and Yerba Buena Island, as well as the existing food distribution and service businesses. We shared back with our board at the end of last year, and then an outreach earlier in this year, 2 different potential types of benefits. One would be a cash-based benefit for these eligible businesses based on the number of employees. Another approach would be toll tags that would be able to be identified with accounts that had pre-filled value, and especially prioritizing low-income workers and their travel on and off the island. Some of the feedback that we heard, this summary of what we heard from food services was a clear preference for a cash-based subsidy from among those 2 options. The preference was something for the cash option, but the amount was not going to be enough, especially we heard for travel such as the deliveries that you all receive, the shipping both ways, something for customers, so that you gave us feedback about the sort of projected additional amounts that we need to increase the subsidy to address those needs. Concerns about the administration, and concern that of not having a benefit that would be administratively onerous. And we also heard some ideas about partnering with you on communications and outreach to your customers. And this is an example of one of the ideas we heard about partnering to give some kind of benefits for customers, and then helping to make customers aware of their other options when the ferry and other new bus services are introduced. From nonprofits, we heard a wide variety of different feedback and very different preferences in the form of the benefit based on the needs of the different types of travelers that you have associated with your nonprofits. So we heard a clear preference to provide toll tags that had value on them for visitors such as trainees who might otherwise face barriers to access, and the interest in equipping those travelers with toll tags that were already filled with a value so that they could just use those. For employees, we heard a variety of different considerations, and ultimately preference for a choice about what you can offer your employees between a cash benefit versus a toll tag that you could provide for workers. We also heard similar concerns about administrative requirements, and that the program not have too many administrative burdens. And then lastly, that there are also a bunch of other occasional travelers like volunteers, the food pantry delivery vehicle, et cetera, other types of occasional travel that you would like to compensate. And so we should raise the amounts of subsidy that we were offering to accommodate that travel, as well as preference for being able to provide cash reimbursement for those trips. Other creative ideas we heard include, this is an example of one we heard about, a feature that Fast Track doesn't have today, but which is a really great idea that we are going to try to work with them on, which is a way to provide kind of QR codes or some kind of promotional code that some of these occasional travelers could use to obtain that cash or that prepaid travel. So based on all of this feedback, we're recommending a blend of those two options. So trying to keep all of the best benefits of the cash stipend, as well as the benefits of the toll tag offer. And so this is what we're thinking. The baseline benefit from TIMA would be a quarterly subsidy, a cash subsidy to the employer based on the number of employees. But we would expand that in a few different ways. We would increase the amount of the benefit so that there is enough balance there to fund not just employees, but also the other types of travel that we heard. And we would work with the employers who do want to provide toll tags to obtain those toll tags and provide that, make sure that that's an option for those who want to opt in to offer that benefit to their workers. So we would ask and would recommend to our board that employers prioritize the use of this subsidy for your low income employees, but that beyond that priority, the remaining balance of the subsidy would be flexibly available to you for the needs that are most important to you, whether it's deliveries or volunteers or customers. We would partner with those who would like to have toll tags to set up that account for you to be able to have toll tags that are for your office. And an unlimited number of toll tags would be available that we could fill with this subsidy and allow you to distribute toll tags with account value to your employees or trainees as you see fit. We will need to end up executing agreements with each of you for the transfer of these subsidies, and then the administrative pieces that would be required as far as the proof of number of employees, et cetera. And then the last thing we heard was that because this is such a new program, it's all kind of treading new ground here, we should put in a commitment to evaluate and adjust the program after 12 months to just improve the efficiency of it, try to reduce any administrative hurdles, and right size it to the needs that we all see during the first 12 months of operation. And so some of how this might work would look like TIDA verifying the employers that are eligible, so all of the nonprofits, including the One Treasure Island members and the food service businesses. And then we would, as TIMA, provide quarterly just upfront cash to you. So it's not reimbursement basis, it's upfront. And then you would need to tell us the number of employees that you have, because the amount will be based on the number of employees plus an additional, and I'll share the revised amounts in just a second. We would ask that employers prioritize low-income employees for the use of the subsidy, but beyond that, the rest of the subsidy would be available to you flexibly to use for the other needs that you have. This is the revised estimate of the amount of the subsidy per employer, based again on the number of employees you have. And it's a quarterly amount so that, as you may change the number of employees that you have, we would revise the amount of the subsidy accordingly. And so this is, illustrative of what those amounts would be. The employee column, we've taken into account employees of all incomes, just based on our the feedback we've heard about how many employees folks have. But of course, you would tell us, how many employees you have. Then this flexible balance column is the revised amount of subsidy to cover all of those other non-employee types of travel that we heard. And with an example, annual total amount of subsidy per employer. So the next steps for us here are to share these findings and the revised recommendation with the TIMA committee at their meeting next week. And then looking ahead to future months, we have heard the feedback that it's important for us to document all of the changes in the transportation program since 2011 in a central place, a written narrative, a plan, so that people have something they can reference that would include all of the new transit service levels over the years, all of the new toll policies that have been adopted and are still yet to be adopted, the funding profile of the program, and our costs and our expected funding sources. So we are revising the 2011 Treasure Island Transportation Implementation Plan. So I think many of you are familiar with that plan that was adopted along with the development agreement that laid out all of those considerations: transit and other services, toll policies, funding and costs. So we're revising that, and it's going to look like that plan, but just with the updated information. And we plan to bring that to the TIMA committee as an informational presentation in October. And then that would kick off a period of review for all of you to have that document as a reference available to review. And we can, if you're interested, set time to meet again after that time period and later this fall to review it and answer questions that you may have about all of that revised profile of the program. So let me welcome your questions and any other feedback. If you're on the phone, press *9 to raise your hand. The chat is also available if you want to type in your question or comment instead, and Paige will call on folks where she sees a raised hand or a chat.
Rachel, I have one chat. The chat is open publicly, but we have one chat that I received internally that I can read out just to kick us off here. So this is from Tamisha Gardner, and here goes. So a few questions. One, I'll read them all, Rachel, and then I can read them back to you one by one, if that makes sense. So one, should agencies be thinking through possible tax liabilities to staff on the cash subsidy? Two, is this subsidy forever or time limited? Three, what is considered a low income in terms of dollar amount? Four, is this tag only going to work on TI, or do we need to be thinking through how to ensure the tags are not covering costs of other bridges? So
those are okay, great questions. So we will need to, I think, I will need to bring in our finance team, probably to confer with the finance experts at your organization to figure out how we can prevent any tax liability problems with this. I mean, my first thought is this needs to be treated as a commute benefit, you know, the way San Francisco has a commute ordinance for employers of 25 employees or more that calls for any number of pre-tax benefits to be offered. And so I guess my take here is that this ought to follow that same sort of model of a pre-tax benefit, but I think that sounds like a next step that we'll need to work on the terms of what the agreement looks like to address any unintended consequences with respect to tax. So that's a great follow-up for Brittany, who's making notes. And then Tramicia had some other questions.
Mm-hmm. So question 2, is the subsidy forever or time limited?
Yes, this would be, we haven't, we are not proposing a time limit.
What is considered low income in terms of dollar amount?
Yes, low income by the city is considered up to 80% of area median income. And we have a chart that identifies what those income thresholds are by household size. I would say that, you know, we heard the feedback that we should compensate folks beyond low income employees. So that's why we've revised the amounts, the estimated amounts here. So these amounts are based on our understanding of all employees of any income, and where low income would come into play is just the policy recommendation that low income employees be prioritized for the receipt.
Okay, and then the last question in the chat is this tag only going to work on Treasure Island, or do we need to be thinking through how to ensure the tags are not covering costs of other bridges?
Yes, that is a consideration. So we should be able to, if you already have a tag that is associated with your, there's two ways that this could work. So as an employer, you can provide funding directly, this subsidy funding directly into an existing fast track toll tag through the existing BATA, you know, fast track administrators who run BATA, and we can work with you to set that up. We can also equip employers with toll tags that are specific to you as an employer that you could fill at your own discretion. So the consideration here is whether the employer wants to own the toll tag or whether you are okay with or happy to work with toll tags that people already have, that, you know, Paige as an individual has her own toll tag that she owns. So there's two ways of addressing the toll tags. Either we help you as an employer obtain toll tags that you own and you fill, or if it's not a toll tag that you own, that's going to be a different process to put money into that toll tag, but it is possible to do, and we can help set that up.
Great. So we have 2 hands raised. One from Ada, who also has a question in the chat. So I'll just read that quickly, but then see if Ada wants to confirm that that's the question or ask another question. So the question in the chat is, can you give us how many people have replied to surveys as feedback? And then Ada, I'll invite you to unmute. in case you'd like to speak anything.
Well, I think while Ada, if you're having trouble unmuting, if you could chat Paige again so she can help you out. So we conducted a survey earlier this year of residents, and we were asking about the resident exemption and preferences for how residents receive that exemption, either through a license plate or a toll tag. And we are going to present those findings to our board in October, along with the rest of the updates and changes. But the majority preference was for license plates as a means to receive the benefit, but there also was a significant share of folks who were interested in toll tags. And then about 13% who were no preference.
I think the question is, how many people actually provided a feedback? So is it like 10 people reply the feedback, and out of that you get 13 of them, or 13%, or was it 400 people replied to that? So that feedback, number of the feedback is actually in question.
Yes, I can look that up while we are talking here, because I'm not sure if Paige has access to that.
Yeah, because that question came up in previous discussions as well, because it seems to me it comes across as a majority of people with the feedback provided that type of opinions, but we don't know how many people actually express those opinions. But this policy is going to be around, it comes across as if the whole community was giving a feedback, and this policy was around that feedback, but there was only 5 people reply to the feedback versus
We got, so from the resident survey that we did, we got almost a 20% response rate. So we mailed it to all households, and our response rate was close to 20%, which is pretty extraordinary for a mail survey, like a blind mail survey like that. It's usually in the single digits for a typical response rate.
From what I'm gathering, again, from my neighborhood as Colleen, basically everybody in the reply was, we don't want to have any toll bridge to begin with. So that 20% maybe people were overwhelming of replying that they don't want that. So if you want to have a 20% people reply, and then how many of those 20% actually they say that they want to have a toll policies, and if they are, what kind of options? So I think the question is, there is this, but that 20% is a good number, but is the number is in question is, are these numbers that are actually in favor of the policy that you proposing, or just a feedback that people say we don't want it?
Well, so we did not survey residents about the business benefits. We only surveyed residents of
Business. I'm
resident exemption.
talking about the resident.
Yes. So we got a 20% response rate, close to that.
So his response rate is what? For the policy, against the policy, or actually giving the opinions about what kind of policy should be put in place?
The survey was about how current residents would like to receive their exemption. So would they prefer an exemption that was using their license plate, an exemption that was using their toll tag, or neither, or no preference? And the majority of respondents indicated they prefer to use their license plate. And then about 30 something indicated they prefer a toll tag, and about 13% had no opinion.
Interesting. Okay, so the last question that I have before I send it out was actually regarding to, we have a community voting organizations on the club on the island, but we don't have any employees. We do have over 50 now, closer to 65 members, and is growing. So how do you treat those people? How do you treat organizations like ours, that we don't have the employees, but we have quite a bit of the members?
Sure. So for eligible organizations, let me bring that back up again, because I think some people have joined recently and maybe after I got through that part. So the eligible non-residential tenants hasn't changed from our proposal last fall, which is all nonprofits and food service establishments. And the amount of the subsidy would primarily be based on number of employees, because that's what we've heard is the primary cost. And then a flexible balance on top of that, that could be used for any other type of travel.
Yeah, but we do, as I said, this is an all volunteer organization. And we have about 60 plus and is growing volunteers. So how do you account for that?
And you don't, okay, but that sounds like a special case, yeah. We probably need to have a separate discussion with you about how to handle that if you don't have any employees.
Well, yeah, there's actually a couple of organizations like that. There's a Treasure Island Museum, is all volunteer organizations. We are all volunteer organization. And there's also other nonprofits that they do have employees, but they have lots of volunteers, like charity, for example, Catholic Charity, for example. So what is the policies around this type of organizations?
Yes. Well, we did hear from Catholic Charities about their volunteer need, and that's one of the reasons we increased this flexible balance. But this is new information for me that some of the nonprofits really have no employees and are all volunteers. So that does sound like it needs that needs more work.
And if they have an employee, they probably have 1 or 2 people on the administration and maybe bookkeeping, but really the core business runs by volunteers.
Okay.
And members that are volunteers. So.
Okay. Well, thank you for bringing that to my attention. That does sound like it needs some more thought.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Jay Miro had your hand up, but it's not up anymore. So feel free to re-raise it if you'd like to. And then I see Hope Williams has a hand up. So I'll go ahead and unmute you, Hope.
Thank you. It's good to see you guys again.
Hi, Hope.
Hi. Okay, so my question, are you guys ready? I want to make sure I have the information correct. So 13% of the 20%, which is 600 people out of 3,000, you didn't get a response from, like they really didn't put a choice out. Is that correct?
We did not get all people responding to the survey, no.
So about 13% out of that 600 didn't really give a valid answer to their preference.
They did not submit a preference, no.
Okay, so with that, that's where our population is only about 3,000. So I could see 20% and say a population of 50,000 or 100,000, that would be significant. But if you were only able to get 7% out of that 3,000 to actually give a preference, that's not valid data to actually present. So we really need to have a conversation about the narrative that we're putting out there, because if 13% out of the 600 people didn't give a response, that's a message in itself. And we want transparency. And what was that message? We want very clear, detail spread, all of that. And not at the October meeting where you present to the board. We want that before you present to the board, to the community. openly and transparent, because it's going, if you didn't get that much, it's not valid information. We can't move forward with that. And so it makes me question if that was the feeling of the residents, then it concerns me of how we're moving forward in the businesses and how we're allocating things for the businesses, because it doesn't really seem like we have the accurate data. So that's my first point. The second point, our businesses are still in COVID response. And now with the Delta variant and the Wu variant, they're still in recovery. So how are we factoring this, that day by day and year by year, we're in nearly year 2, at least 18 months into COVID and the breakdown of COVID and recovery on the island. And that looks different for us and our businesses, even our new business development, versus what might be in San Francisco. So how are we looking at that and how we're still on track to move forward with 2024, but our businesses have literally lost nearly 2 years of income in the middle of this pandemic?
Yeah, so we definitely expect a setback to and delay in all kinds of new activity on the island because of the virus and the pandemic. So one of the things that we'll include in this revised TITIP, the report, is revised projections for travel. So the amount of new land use in addition to the existing land use that is expected to be occupied. And we have that information from TITA and from the developer, and as well as from the city. And the resulting estimated travel that would come from that, which is definitely lower than our previous projections of travel. So I think the point about the transportation impact, we've tried to take into account. As far as overall business other considerations like the lease costs and things like that, I think I need to defer to TITA about leases.
Rachel, should I see if Liz would like to speak?
We could take Jim's question. Jim has his hand.
Okay, great. Let me unmute Jim.
Sir, okay. Can you guys hear me? All right, there you go. All right, so Rachel, I know, again, I know you guys have been working hard on this, but again, I just want to point to our last discussion, which was this is focusing on the subsidy and potentially the business's cost. The big picture is we still don't have a big picture about what are we, what's the cost to us? This is a subsidy, great. We don't know the toll, we don't know transportation services, and there's that whole big issue that we still been asking for, the businesses have been asking for, and we still not got that answer. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that again, we made it clear from a bunch of businesses is like, well, have you guys done an economic impact study about what a toll is going to do to the future development of businesses on Treasure Island or Buena Island going forward, and how that's going to impact what businesses, who's going to be the businesses there, and that. Again, that's been ignored again, and we would just, I think the community, the city, everybody needs to know, like, okay, well, what's going to happen if you have a toll on this thing? You're focusing on the cost and the revenue of the toll, but what's the bigger picture? And again, I understand that from the last meeting you said you didn't have any, and you hadn't done that. So I think let's bring it up a level before we get into the weeds about the subsidies and how much it costs and what have you. But all right, so those are the other thing. And again, maybe that update's coming. I don't know, but again, you're asking us to say, oh, this subsidy is a good subsidy and it's going to work for us. But there's a subsidy, but we don't even know what the cost is going to be on our businesses, on our customers, on our employees, because the toll levels, the transportation services, all that is still to be defined. All right, so let's step that up one more time. And then finally, it's like we're trying to say, like, do we want to stay here, and do we want to continue to do businesses on the island and provide services both to bring people on the island, but also to the people that live here as well. So that needs to be answered very high level from not just you as a transportation planner, but the whole board of supervisors, because I think it's really a fundamental important thing that has been ignored for probably 2 to 3 years as we all been talking to you. All right, so I'm going to go down to a little bit. I'm going to ask a question, and again, I would like to know if we're going to get that. I would like to know if at some point are we going to get a big picture of what's going to happen with an economic impact study of how that's going to affect businesses and also the development as a whole, because I think, frankly, the developers are going to want to know that. All right. But here's another question, and I'm representing myself, also a couple other folks on the island that are businesses. So the question I have for you, you said for nonprofits, I'm a for-profit business, so that doesn't apply to me. Am I food services? I'm a winery. I guess, that's a question you need to ask. I need an answer to. And also there's guys like Craig who runs the motorcycle. He's got clients that are paid clients that come to his shop and they service his thing. They're customers, but they're kind of clients. And I actually have some of those too, because I contract out and I make wine for other people. So I guess they're contractors. I don't know. I mean, it's not just full-time employees. These are clients. So it impacts me. It impacts probably Jim Woods. The distilleries on the island are going to have that as well. So we need to know, are we part of this or are we not? Is there a carve out for some, but who knows? And if you say if it's up to TIDA, then TIDA is then the arbiter of like who gets the subsidy and who doesn't. And that's kind of doesn't sit well with a lot of businesses, including myself. So I need you to answer that question first, and then maybe we can get an answer whether, we're going to get a better understanding of the big question of what's the economic impact of a toll, what businesses are going to be wanted out here, and all that kind of stuff. And again, we've been asking that question over and over again for many years. And the subsidy, you've done a lot of work. Thank you. But that's great. That's a subsidy against a cost which is still unknown. So with that, I'll mute myself.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Understood. About the order that these things are coming in it. So for many of your questions, like about the definition of what defines food service business, and also the economic impact study, and whether that's something that TIDA ever has done or would do, I need to confer with TIDA about that. And I take back your feedback about the order that the information is being presented, that it is not so useful to you to hear the specifics about the subsidy to be presented before the rest of the toll policy proposal or service levels, because you need to review this in light of that. So I think that's a comment to us that I take on board, and let me see what I can do about that.
All right, we've got another hand raised from Hope.
Thank you. So this meeting here, will it be sent, will you send this to us? that we will be able to share, because that is our biggest concern, is that we come into these spaces and we're just left with, like Jim said, just no answers to the bigger questions that we have. And there's residents that are trying. COVID has changed a lot. So people are looking at career changes and opportunities, and the population within San Francisco has drastically changed, where we're trying to bring more Black businesses to San Francisco, and we have no Black businesses on Treasure Island. So just thinking about like the disparity in which this will cause in trying to establish businesses on this island for residents to kind of evolve. I mean, we're just not really getting these questions answered when we come into this space. So it's quite concerning that we're still here after all this time. I appreciate what you guys do, but it's really, we do need the people who are making the bigger decisions in this space, and we keep asking for that, but it's not happening.
Yeah. So Liz from TIDA is here, and and if you have insight about land use questions, which we don't, please do share that. I think we do intend to make this available on our website right after this. So Paige, do you want to describe when people can expect to be able to get this reporting?
Sure. Yeah, we can put it on the website. Let's see, I'll put a link to it tonight, and then we'll swap it out for a YouTube video once we can upload the full thing tomorrow. So tonight after this meeting, there should be a link on our Treasure Island website on the outreach section. And we'll also send an email out if you're on the Treasure Island email list, which you can sign up at our website, which I'll put in the chat right here. And we'll email the link out as well. So I'm not seeing any other hands up. Also looking for comments. I see some comments in the chat, but I don't see any questions.
So I will brief. I think I shared that Monica Barnett from the District 6 office is here tonight and also hearing your feedback. So I will connect with her about how to add the feedback that we're hearing tonight to our update to the TIMA committee next week, so that they hear this feedback as well alongside the input that we got earlier in the summer. I hope. Hope maybe having some difficulties unmuting.
Oh, there you go. Okay, I promise this will be my step back after this. But I really want to push for the feedback that if we're not going to honor the request in these spaces, we really need to put a pause. So in our town hall meeting in April, Haney promised that, if the toll was not fitting, if there wasn't value, if we didn't have like all the things that's being played out, you don't have a valid amount of survey responses, you don't have the, a bigger picture for the businesses, all the things that, you're presenting right now are not lining up, that there wouldn't be this where you would proceed. So if this is really the case, I'm really pushing that we need to put the pause on there, and instead of just moving forward with saying this is going to happen in 2024, knowing that it's going to drastically impact the employment that's on Treasure Island for our businesses, our residents, as a whole is going to devastate this community that is already struggling.
Looks like Atta and then Barkley.
Yes. Okay, so you were referring about, I think Jim was asking about the economic surveys and other things, and you keep referring to the TIDA. But the last time that we talked to and Bob Beck basically said that actually TEMA is on their own. All the decisions are made through TEMA. So I'm not sure why we keep referring to TIDA when what really TEMA is on the driving seat. And it seems to me you're referring to organizations that really don't have anything to do with this process. So if we need to get the information, because we asked that information before, what was the economical impact? What are the other issues? And you referred to TIDA. So it seems to me TIDA was in the loop, but Bob was very clear that TIDA is not in the loop as far as doing this kind of food work type of works, which are crucial on making the decisions to going forward. So when are you guys going to do your own study and disclose those studies rather than referring to the TIDA? Thank you.
Okay.
So we agree. So going forward, we're not going to be referring to the TIDA as getting the information from them because they don't have any information. They said in the beginning, they never done any kind of surveys. They're not even part of they're not on the execution and implementations of TEMA. So it's basically you, or your organization that have to come up with the request for economical impact rather than referring to TEMA. So I just want to make sure we are clear on this. So on the next presentation, you don't refer to TIDA again. So we have to know where we have to go and get that information from. Who would be responsible for give us that information? If TIDA,
Sure. Yeah.
Got it.
So, yeah, I understand. I understand what I think I understand what you're saying, and I hear your frustration. I think that what we don't have jurisdiction over is the land use. So any decisions related to land use at all and leases, and that's a kind of a foundational part of an economic impact. So that's where I'll think Liz and I will need to follow up after this to make sure we're all being consistent with you and describing what would be involved.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, Barkley had a hand raised. Next.
Yeah, my point was basically the same as Atta's. A lot of it from what Bob Beck has told us is that TIMA controls the majority of this toll implementation. So I don't know, like Atta's saying, if there can be a slideshow or clear documentation that's written out of what TIMA is responsible for in toll implementation and what TIDA is responsible for so that we know who to talk to. So we're not asking the wrong people the wrong questions in the wrong venues, because that seems to cause a lot of confusion in general in this whole toll process and waste people's time just in general. Because if we're asking you questions that we should be asking another partner, it would be nice if all of the partners that are involved in this can write it out, put it on the website, and give us clear contacts or either emails, phone numbers, contact forms. That just makes it very clear for us to voice these concerns and get a response in a kind of clear and concise way to just have less confusion for everyone involved. And I don't know if this can be directly answered in this meeting, but I always wondered, is there a legal requirement for us to implement the toll by 2024? Or is that just a goal of when all the partners are trying to implement the toll?
Yeah, so I take on board your feedback about, confusion and lack of clarity about who to go to for what issues. So I think I'll round up with Tida about that. And the question about when the program should start. So we are following the TITIP, the 2011 TITIPs, I guess what it called for, which is that the whole program would launch with the first phase of development or the first new units. It sort of talked both about the first new units as well as the first phase. And so that's where we're taking the call for the program start.
The next hand was Jay Mira.
Yeah, this is Jim again. And again, I just don't want the question, a very specific question that was kind of, sloughed over. When the definition for the subsidies were food services and nonprofits. There's several businesses that may or may not fall into that category. And then we need to have a full, clear answer of where does that line is drawn.
Yes.
And more importantly, if it's just food services, am I a food services? Are the distilleries food services? The Craig at the motorcycle shop, he's not a food services. And again, if you go back and say, well, that's up to TIDA, then if we're not getting the answers, as a lot of us have said, from TIDA, then how can we make a decision on the subsidies that you're putting forward? And then going back to my other point, which was we don't even know the cost because you haven't presented the bigger picture yet. You're just focusing on subsidies as opposed to what the big picture is going to look like later on, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. So, but I'm really clearly, and I think it's up to TIDA, also Haney's office, to say, okay, we need to have a clear answer about this specific issue. And then I'm more than happy to talk to you guys about bigger issue, but that's something that I know a couple of guys on the island are real concerned about. Thank you.
Yeah, understood. That makes complete sense.
All right, and Ada has a hand raised. I believe this is a new hand, so feel free to speak.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, keep going back and forth. So I've got a couple of questions. One is regarding to, basically, it seems to me this program hinges around different milestones with the built up. And that could be very different than number of the people are actually occupying the places. And so I think the last meeting that we had, and with Matt Haney, we brought this one up and says there could be a discrepancy with number of the buildings are built and number of the people are occupying it. And there could be a huge difference here. You could have, I don't know, 2,000 buildings and there's only maybe 200 people living there. With right now with the COVID, with people are moving from the city, all this kind of stuff. So there's lots of empty buildings in it. So how we could revise this policy to actually reflect occupancy rather than the building. That's one issue. So, and we brought up last time, and I think we didn't know what the resolution was or when we could take this one up. Second part is we were talking to a construction folks, and they were saying that we were asking them, what are the parts that you guys are working on? And some of them, they said they were working on the toll bridge. And I thought that we are part of the surveying and to see if this is actually makes sense to go forward. But is it true that actually they're building up the toll bridges right now? The infrastructure for the toll bridge? So those are the two questions.
Yeah, so no, my understanding is that we are building the Southgate Road realignment right now. That whole connection of roadways that connect the north, where the new ramps touch down with Southgate Road and rebuilding that connection with the bike and ped on and off ramp.
So they're not building the toll bridge right now? They're not putting the infrastructure for the toll bridge right now? Are you saying that they're not?
No,
Okay.
that's not something I'm familiar with, no.
So who would know about that? If the construction.
So for the construction on the island right now,
Well, the construction working on this particular project, which is actually toll bridge itself. So it's not part of your organizations?
so the toll is under the responsibility of TIMA, but I'm not aware of any construction happening of toll on the island. No, we're doing construction of the Southgate Road area.
Got it. So if you could look into that idea, the concern that built off versus occupancy, because that could be a huge difference. And we brought this one up several times, and hopefully now somebody could take it to the high level.
Yeah, I do. So this is a general point about the milestones in the development agreement, as I understand it. And my understanding is that they are related to units certified for occupancy. And Liz, do correct me if I'm wrong about this, because that is a matter that's under TIDA, is how those milestones are defined, whether it's occupied units or just units certified for occupancy. And I think it is that latter, certified for occupancy, and that's not something that the TIMA board has a jurisdiction over.
So we have to go to TIDA to revise that policy, because that policy, from what I understood, for about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even longer, and that was before COVID. I mean, COVID changed the whole world. And so if this has to be revised, so are you saying that TIDA, Bob Beck's group, responsible for that, to revising it? Am I right?
They are responsible for development milestones, sort of the requirements of the developer associated with their development milestones.
Got you.
Yeah, Rachel, this is Liz from TIDA. Can I just clarify that those
Please.
milestones that you're referencing are in the development agreement, which is essentially a contract that was executed between the developer and TIDA. There's also that's called the DDA. And then there's the DA, which is a contract between the developer and the city. And in the DDA, and by the way, everyone, these documents are available for your review on the TIDA website, which is sftreasureisland.org. And in the DDA, there is an exhibit, and I forgot the exhibit letter. I believe it's at the bottom of the list, PP or something like that. And it's called the schedule for, let me look it up. I forgot the title, but it's the obligations of the developer spelled out in a chart with the triggers all listed. And this is part of an approved and agreed upon document. And it's essentially, my word is a contract, but it is an approved agreement that went all the way through the Board of Supervisors. And the exhibit shows what the obligations are. And to my mind, or to my knowledge, I should say, I don't believe any of that has been revised. And if it does need revision, it would have to go all the way back through the whole public vetting process and Board of Supervisors approval. So I don't know if that clarifies your question, Atta, but this is, it's TIDA in the sense that TIDA struck the agreement with the developer. But what my understanding of the split of responsibilities here is that TIDA works and oversees the development, but the TIMA is the agency and are the ones that will develop the policies to implement what the obligations as spelled out in the various agreements in the DDA.
Got it. Yeah, I understand now. So just like
Okay,
any
thank
other
you.
contract, yeah. So like any other contract, if there is a discrepancy or there's changes needs to be or amendment needs to be made, then we have to know what the process in place that we could go. And so, like for example, in this case here, the whole trigger point was based on the licensing, the occupancy, rather than the actual people living there. Got it. Okay. So we need to do a little bit of research on it to see who we have to approach in order to get the amendment to any kind of contracts, not only this contract. Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, we have a question from Barkley in the chat that says, how many of current businesses are not covered under the subsidy? Can that study be done and come back to us with the written report? And then Hope said he is referencing our April 24th town hall meeting.
Yes, we can come back with a report on how many are not covered. And I will need to consult TIDA as the one who is the owner of all of the leases, the non-residential leases, to understand, what that number of leases is at this time.
Okay, I don't see any more hands raised or any more questions in the chat.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for taking the time, and you've all made some very good points that I know that you have many of these, as you point out, you've made before. So let's, I will make some more progress for the next time that we talk. And work with Monica on how we can make sure that our committee knows all of this breadth of feedback. So thank you. Thank you all. And we'll be in touch. Thank you. Bye-bye.